Today is Palm Sunday, which begins Holy Week for our Christian members and neighbors. And that week will culminate with the celebration of Easter next Sunday. Holy Week tells the story of Jesus' last days, his audacious entrance into Jerusalem on Passover as he challenges the divine claims of the Roman emperor, his last meal with his disciples as he bids them to remember him each time they break bread and share wine together, his arrest following the betrayal by his disciple Judas, his trial under Pilate, and his execution by crucifixion, the despair and fear that sends his disciples fleeing away, abandoning him to his suffering, and the story of his unexpected and miraculous resurrection that regathers his disciples, who create a new community with a deeper understanding of who Jesus was and who the God of love calls them to be. When we engage this whole story of Easter, not just the happy ending that somehow has come to be celebrated with baskets, candy, and bunnies, we experience more fully the depth of the joy and surprise of that last morning, the true power of love over fear. When we skip the hard parts, the risk, the fear, the betrayal, the grief, the suffering, the despair, we lose the meaning of resurrection. Because resurrection is different than the renewal that we see with the expected return of spring. Really, it will be spring. Resurrection is unforeseen, unexpected return of life. What emerges when things have gotten so bad, when despair is so deep and overwhelming that we cannot imagine a future. It's the transforming power of love over fear. And because love is at the heart of resurrection, so is sacrifice. The words sacred and sacrifice both derive from the Latin word sacre, which means to set apart or remove from ordinary human use in service of a divine or higher purpose. Sacred stories offer us the why, the narrative, the history that explains or justifies what we claim as sacred. They try to answer Thurman's persistent questions. What is the end of our doings? Where are we trying to go? Where do we put the emphasis and where are our values focused? For what end do we make sacrifices? Where is my treasure? And what do I love most in life? What do I hate most in life? And to what am I true? The word sacrifice, then, means to take something or someone out of the world of the ordinary and dedicate them to a divine or higher purpose. Animals sacrificed on altars to gods, vows taken to enter holy orders, giving one's life in service to one's country, the hero who gives her or his life to save the many or the vulnerable are classic examples of sacrifice. And then there are the everyday sacrifices we make that we may not think about for our partners, our children, our parents, our friends, our coworkers, even people we don't know, giving something of ourselves on their behalf, out of a commitment to a higher cause or value, or simply out of love. Sacrifice transforms an act or a life or even a death into something that transcends the ordinary, enlivening that deeper note in our souls. In his life, Jesus offered a different vision of human relationships with God and with one another than that of the Roman Empire. or any empire. One grounded in love rather than fear, and one in community rather than conquest. And he focused his life and ministry on living into this vision of beloved community by transforming ordinary or even profane acts into sacred ones, eating with those who were thought to be unclean, or gathering needed food on the Sabbath. And he knew his vision threatened Rome and the powerful in Jerusalem. He knew he was risking his life. When I read the part of the story of Jesus praying in the Garden of Gethsemane, I can really feel the risks he took and the costs of the sacrifices he had already made, as well as the one to come. He does not come across as a divine being cloaked in human form who knows everything will be fine in the end, his resurrection assured. This is Jesus at his most human, vulnerable, despairing, facing the dark night of the soul. He steps away from the chaos, the noise, the demands made upon him by his disciples and by the crowds that follow him everywhere and by the authorities that pursue him. He searches for a stillness, a deeper note that will ground him. And in his prayer, he is asking those persistent questions. For what end is he making these sacrifices? Where is his treasure? And what does he love most in life? To what is he true? When interpreting this story, most preachers and theologians focus on Peter, James, and John, his disciples, and their failure, revealed in the next passage, to stay awake and keep watch while Jesus prays. Or they focus on Jesus' absolute trust in God, despite his plea to take the cup and pass him by, as he says in the end of his prayer, "Not what I will, but what you will." But I am moved by Jesus' loneliness, a sense of abandonment, not only by his disciples, but by God. For God does not answer Jesus' prayer, at least not that we hear. And we hear it again echoed on Good Friday. My God, why have you abandoned me? And yet some clarity, if not comfort, must have come, because by the end, Jesus seems resolved, his heart clear. Jesus will make the sacrifice without knowing the outcome. As I wrote this, I recognized that my sermons have covered some pretty heavy theological topics recently. Faithful disobedience, the reality of evil, and now sacrifice. This speaks to the times we are in, confusing and chaotic and noisy, uncertain, even cruel. And I'm turning to these topics because I find myself needing to center down, to go deep, and find stillness enough to listen for a deeper note, what the sacred, the source of my being, calls me to be and do. I resonate with Thurman's words. The streets of our minds seethe. With endless traffic, our spirits resound with clashing, with noisy silences, while something deep within hungers and thirsts for a still moment, a resting lull, with full intensity. I seek a fresh order in my living, a direction, a strong, sure purpose that will structure my confusion and bring meaning to the chaos. Not that I have received any clear answers, I'm afraid, especially the one I want, which is to know that everything will be okay, that justice and goodness and mercy and love will prevail. Instead, I received the reminder to seek the people, the places, and the practices that nurture those things, that nurture goodness and justice and mercy and love, and to not give in to despair, despite the evidence. I know that many of us are wrestling with how to meet the chaos and the confusion and the cruelty. Thousands gathered across the country yesterday to protest the growing authoritarianism, including on the Common here. And while these protests are colorful, energetic, and even humorous with the signs and the costumes, they are not without risk of sacrifice. Back in January, as clergy members from around the country prepared to go to Minneapolis to protest the ICE surge, their bishops and denominational leaders advised them to get their wills and such in order, just in case. And they went to Minnesota knowing they were putting their bodies on the line, risking harassment, arrest, and physical violence. And Renee Good and Alex Preddy, who were not clergy, both sacrificed their lives. It is very risky to speak publicly, to advocate, to support loving our neighbors these days, especially neighbors who are different in ways that conflict with the white Christian nationalist model of America. And their lives are being sacrificed every day. But unlike those of us who are gathered for protests and the like, their sacrifice comes without their consent, as they are taken off the streets and out of schools and homes and places of work, separated from their loved ones and put in detention centers or deported to countries they do not know. They are dying too, and we do not know the full extent of how many or why. This is a different sort of sacrifice, one to the idols of power and violence, of empire, which does not see humanity in the people they deem disposable, whether here or abroad. But our UU faith claims that they are all human beings and sacred to us, and they are our neighbors despite all attempts to demonize them. And part of our faithful work is to lift that up and proclaim that truth. We are still in the middle of the week. We are still in the middle of the story, a darker period in our history for sure, but neither new nor the worst that has been seen. I do believe that more sacrifices will be asked of us, will be needed of us for the sake of our neighbors within and beyond our borders, for the sake of our children and our children's children, and for the sake of our planet. We may not know yet what these sacrifices will be or whether we have the courage to make them. But even things that seem simple, like gathering on a Saturday afternoon to listen to speeches and wave signs, or bringing groceries to a family afraid to go out, or helping people vote, will bring greater risk the more divided and desperate things become. To stay prepared, we can follow Jesus in the garden. Step away from the noise and the chaos, the demands and the fear, to center down. To listen, as Thurman says, to that deeper note within us, the one that reminds us where our treasure is and what we love most, and to what we are true. In that stillness, we won't find certainty, but maybe we will find direction. Not all the answers, but the next right step that is within our reach. And as we see each week gathered here, we are not alone. We have one another in this community and the wider one, present today, and we also have the generations before us who risk something for love. Perhaps that is what Jesus heard in answer to his prayer, not that hard things won't come, but that love, which is what makes us and our neighbors sacred to one another, will not have the last word taken from it. For that is where the holy and the sacred abide.